If you're wondering if this is the season where you start going to therapy or you consider therapy, or if someone has said to you, you need to go to therapy, or if you said to somebody, you need to go to therapy, and then you realize, oop, I'm the me, that's the you, I need to go to therapy. So often we kind of throw out this concept of you need to go to therapy, but we don't often give people the actionable steps and the tools that they need to actually go to therapy, nor do we oftentimes explain why people should go to therapy. I'm Jamie Grace, I'm a singer-songwriter. I've been in and out of therapy for a long time, and I greatly benefit from being in therapy. So just like an athlete, maybe a semi-pro athlete, experiences a lot of hits, goes to physical therapy, I think it's important for everyday humans to go to talk therapy or counseling. But also there are some times where you're not a semi-pro athlete, but you're a full-time pro athlete, and physical therapy is something that you really have to devote to. Well, when you have a diagnosis or when you have something in life that hits you really hard, I think it's imperative to up those therapy sessions. And maybe it's not an occasional check-in, like an occasional physical therapy session. Maybe you're going on a regular basis because your emotional health and your mental health absolutely need it. So I hope that if you're curious about the whole, why are you going to therapy? That's why, because I'm an everyday human getting hit with everyday life stuff, just like the rest of us. And I also have a pretty lengthy diagnosis that cannot be great all the time. The reason why I'm able to live the life that I live and have a lot of the healthy and beautiful experiences that I have is because I'm very pro therapy. It's very rare that you'll meet a pro athlete that is excelling at their sport that won't be able to introduce you to their trainer and their physical therapist and their other sporty stretch person to show you how they are helping them prepare for the world that they face on a regular basis. I want to make sure that I also give the disclaimer that I am not a therapist. I do have some experience and education in this space, but I'm not a therapist. And these are strictly my opinions and research and a little bit of my education as well. Sometimes therapy can seem like this wide open door of just like, oh my gosh, I gotta unpack all my stuff and fix everything and solve everything and get all this advice. That's too much pressure to put on yourself or your therapist. So let's try to narrow that down here, especially if you got to come out of your pocket and pay for therapy. We want to make sure that you are actually getting the best and the most out of the experience, right? Something that I like to ask people is, if you're considering therapy, ask yourself, are you trying to focus on your past, your present, or your future? Because those kinds of things, they can intertwine with each other. Don't get me wrong, but it can be really difficult to really focus on more than one of those things at a time. If you sit down and talk about your childhood with someone, you might eventually talk about where you want to be in 5, 10, 20 years. If you talk about your present day with someone, yeah, your childhood's probably going to come up. And if you're talking about your future dreams and goals, it's possible that you're going to talk about where you are right now. But trying to unpack all of those things at one time, you will likely be very overwhelmed. And like I said, especially if you are coming out of pocket to pay for therapy, that's a lot of work you're trying to do early on. So let's prepare. Let's pregame. Let's pregame for therapy. There are different kinds of therapy. I won't be able to unpack all of those today, but some of the general concepts that you might hear are like a psychiatrist. They are allowed to prescribe medication. Then you have a therapist. They typically are not licensed to prescribe medication, but that is your stereotypical sitting on the couch, laying on the Chage Lounge. How does that make you feel? The person where you talk about your feelings in your life and that kind of thing. Then there's also like a guidance counselor at a college, a pastoral counselor at a church, school counselors, guidance counselors, Christian counseling. I think that stuff is also really beneficial. I'm a person of faith, and so I really value that work. But I want to be very clear and say that these are not all the same work. They might do the same work sometimes, but they're not the same work. A pastor or a Christian counselor and a licensed therapist and a psychiatrist prescribing medication can all be beneficial for one person at different seasons or at the same season, and that is okay. Now, if someone comes to me and they're like, hey, I don't know what to do about my future. I don't know what college to go to. I don't know what grad program to choose. I don't know where my relationship is headed. I don't know about this job opportunity. I'm thinking about moving across the country. If someone comes to me and they're like, what do you think I should do about this future opportunity? I will typically say, do you have a guidance counselor, or do you have someone that's in pastoral ministry, a Christian counselor, a mentor, someone in your church or school or other healthy, organized space that can talk you through this stuff? That's not the only purpose for that, but I honestly do think that future-oriented stuff and goal-oriented stuff, especially when it might be more short-term, is best suited in that area. Now, if we're talking a psychiatrist, somebody that is prescribing medication, I would typically say, again, I'm not a therapist, but I would typically say that is best suited, and for me has been best suited when it comes to present day. Especially the main scenario that I can think of is when I was dealing with postpartum depression. Our daughter is 4.5 now, and praise the Lord, we have come a very long way. But that was a present situation where I was able to see, my husband was able to see, my parents were able to see, my sister, my people were able to see the present situation. I needed some help. I needed someone to walk with me. I needed someone to help me consider my options as far as natural stuff and medication and all of those things. And so a psychiatrist was best suited for me at that time. However, at the same time, I was also seeing a therapist, like a talk therapist, if you will. And that was really helpful too. So present day stuff, I say a therapist. And then if you need to get escalated to a psychiatrist, then that could be helpful. But it's also not bad to go to a psychiatrist, because if you end up with a really good one, they will likely also have some like the talk experience as well. But when we're talking about talk therapy, my favorite stuff to talk about, the therapy that I have been in and out of for a very long time because it has been very beneficial for me, past, present, future, yes, but past, man. It can be so helpful to sit down with someone and talk about your childhood, talk about how you were raised, talk about the kids you knew, talk about the friends you had, talk about the friends you didn't have. It can be so beneficial to sit down and talk about that stuff. Even if you're sitting there thinking, I don't have anything that went on, or I've already unpacked it, or I don't even know where I would start. If you can find a healthy, safe space to unpack the first however many years of your life that you can remember, I do think that if you just buckle up and stay along for the ride with a really trusted human, a really trusted individual, you can grow and learn and heal so much. What's this? Did you bring me a snack? That is so sweet. Thank you so much. I wrote this down and I want to make sure that I say it exactly how I wrote it, but therapy isn't about solving every issue on day one with an undeniable bond between you and therapist. It can take a few tries to find a therapist that you really like. It can be a little overwhelming to find a rhythm, a pace, and an environment that makes sense for you. I one time had a therapist that I thought was really amazing, and still to this day, if I had someone that came to me with a very specific need, I'd probably refer them to her because she was amazing for this very specific thing. But where her office was located and the way that the environment and the setup and everything, it wasn't beneficial to me. That doesn't matter to some people, but it really mattered to me and had a not so great impact on my therapy. I also did online therapy for, the pandemic and a little bit after as well. I've shared videos about that. But that wasn't beneficial for me once I was able to start going in person again. And so you want to make sure that you're in an environment that makes sense for you, and it might take you a few tries, and that's okay. Don't beat yourself up about having to, set a consult or a phone call up with a therapist and then talking to them on the phone and being like, oh, I don't really know if that's going to work out. Or having a session with them and being like, oh, I think that was fine. I'll try a second session, but I don't know if it's going to be a thing, right? In the same way that after 2 or 3 sessions, you might find a deeper bond or connection with that same person that you didn't have initially. It's kind of like dating. You can't assume that the first person that you date is going to be the person that you marry, even though it's kind of possible that the first person that you date could be the person that you marry. But if you go into it thinking, oh, the first one is going to be, well, then you're stuck with this promise and this commitment to an unknown human. And that can be really murky and unhealthy and creepy. And we don't want to do that. So go into this with an open mind. knowing that they are legally obligated to sit with you in whatever space you bring, and they are not gonna tell your business to other people. It's a safe space, and you can case it out, consider it, weigh the odds, and see what it's like. Something that I like to recommend to people is to have 2 to 3 questions prepared for a therapist when you go in there. Like I said, it's great to kind of have a general idea of like, oh, I want to talk about my past, or oh, I want to talk about my present, or oh, I want to talk about my future. But it is 100% okay if you're not ready to talk about your personal life just yet. So you can go into therapy and say, hey, what is it like for you being a therapist? How long have you been a therapist? Do you work with a lot of people like me? And you can even be more specific and say, do you work with a lot of people in their 30s? Do you work with a lot of moms? Do you work with a lot of Black people? Like, you can say that kind of stuff to a therapist. And if, the therapist says like, no, I don't like people in their 30s. Well, look at that. You have your answer. They're not for you. Hopefully that does not happen, but it's okay to ask them questions a little bit and to kind of get a feel for what it'll be like. One thing that I like to ask a therapist is, so what's kind of your style? What's kind of your vibe? And maybe that question just works for my personality type because I'm a very nosy person, and it is no secret that I'm a very nosy person. But I like to know what I'm getting into. And so every therapist that I've had, and the main reasons why I've ever changed is because I've moved across the country, but and typically they're not licensed in more than one state, but every therapist that I've had, if I go to them and I'm like, so what's your vibe? What are you doing here? They will usually give me an answer. Well, I like to spend a couple sessions getting to know you. I could tell you about myself. I could tell you about where I went to school. And you'll find that therapists are not, at least the good ones, are not these people waiting to tell you everything you're doing wrong. They're not these people waiting to give you a bunch of advice and tell you what to do and fix you and correct you. That's not what should be happening. In the same way, when we see one of the, top athletes and they have their trainers and their team to thank, when we see phenomenal vocalists who talk about their vocal coaches and their piano teachers that, were with them, that taught them discipline and things like that, that's the same thing. When we hear someone's triumphant recovery from, a surgery or a medical condition, a physical medical condition, and they talk about their doctor or their surgeon, it's very similar. But it's not exactly the same because it's the mind and we can't always see the things, but a good therapist will walk alongside you, guide you, encourage you, support you, meet you where you are with your past, present, future, and anywhere in between, to help you take that next step in your life to wherever it is that you want to go. There's such a thing as art therapy. There's music therapy. There's drama therapy where they do like acting classes in groups. There's group therapy where you can be with other people that have similar things going on in their lives, and it should be led by like a licensed counselor or something like that. There's so many different ways to get support and to reach out and not feel isolated and not feel alone in a world that can cause a lot of us to feel quite isolated and alone. So I hope this video helps. If you have any other questions about this, feel free to comment down below. I would love to help as I can. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I will talk to you later. Okay, bye.